Joined now by the president of baseball operations for the Cardinals, John Mozeliak. And John, thanks for being with us here today on High Heat. I can watch Nolan hit and defend all day long. What has impressed you the most now that he's been on your team for a couple of years?
Well, I think you touched on it. He's just such a complete player. But, obviously when you look at him from a defensive standpoint, he can do things that most people can't. And I think we sort of always joke that he has this internal clock that allows him to always time the out so perfectly. And then from an offensive standpoint, obviously a middle of the order type hitter. Cardinals are always in search of those. And, obviously we acquired a couple of them when you think about Goldie and Nolan. So, they're just like pillars of our team. And it's been great to see Nolan get off to a hot start. And obviously we need that.
Yeah, you mentioned you need it. The rest of the offense kind of scuffling a little bit in this early going. What needs to happen, John?
Well, I think really it's just get warmer weather and just get into a routine. I think that first week and a half for us was pretty challenging with off days because of, protecting home openers. And then, of course, we had a couple rainouts. We're finally getting into sort of everyday baseball. And so excited to see what that looks like and just get into that routine.
And I would imagine that with an experience-laden club that you have as the president of baseball ops, you don't worry too much about these guys. I mean, look at who's in your lineup, look at who's on your rotation, just the experience that they bring. How much does that give you comfort?
Well, it gives you a lot of comfort, but I think when you have this job, you worry about everything. You're always concerned, and winning heals lots of things. But I do think when you look at our roster, it is pretty diverse in the sense of we have a lot of experience with guys that have seen it, done it, and we also have some emerging players and hopefully emerging young stars. So I think when you look at just sort of the balance of what this roster looks like, it's exciting. I think our fans appreciate it, and we hope we put an entertaining product out there for people to watch.
Yeah, you have a great fan base. You always have. The Cardinals, such a historic organization. Albeit a slow start, you're still right there in the thick of things in the NL Central. Oliver Marmol, you knew he was the right guy for the job. Young in his managerial experience, but what have you seen from him so far as the skipper of this club?
Well, I think he's a talented young man. As you point out, I think he's the youngest manager in baseball, but I don't think age necessarily defines you in this role. And he's someone that has come up through our system. He was drafted by the Cardinals, played in our minor league system, and then, of course, crossed over and became a coach and then a manager. And then he's joined our major league staff back in 2017. So he's seen a lot. He's experienced a lot for a young manager. But I also think he just understands sort of our players, what we expect out of our team, and really what we want out of our staff. And so he's done really a seamless job in this transition, and really pleased with how things are going for him.
Yeah, and Wainwright and Yachty and Albert Pujols, all older than your 35-year-old skipper. Did that ever give you pause? It's a little bit of a strange dynamic.
Not really, but it is an odd dynamic. And to have those three guys on this team is something that I think, anybody that's a Cardinal fan, probably if you think back to 10 or 11 years ago and said, hey, we'll have all three together when we get to 2022, I don't think anybody would have imagined that. And here we are. It is a little bit like putting the band back together, and there is sort of a nice feel to that. But when you look at those three individuals and what they mean to a team from a leadership standpoint, from like a continuity standpoint, those three guys are they're priceless. And so they bring so much more than just pure performance to a roster. And so, watching Yachty and Albert interact, and then of course, add Waino into that group, it's kind of fun. And so when the camera will screen our dugout, the three of them are usually chatting. I think it's a great story, but of course, this business is about winning. So, ultimately that's what we're going to be defined as. But, I do think watching that interaction and what they mean to other players has been really important early on.
Yeah, it's great to see those three guys still getting it done in the, obviously in the lineup as well as on the hill. I want to take you back to the first couple of games of this series, John, between the Mets. Now, 5 hit batsmen so far for New York. It's been interesting. The Mets not blaming the Cardinals by any stretch, but talking about the baseball. Chris Bassett visibly frustrated, vocally frustrated, but then Miles Mikolas comes out and says, it's not necessarily the ball. Take some ownership for it as well. What's your take on all of this?
That's the first I've heard of that. But I mean, I did hear that what Chris had said, but I didn't know that Miles had a response. But like, look, I think like everybody has their own sort of take on what's happening with the baseballs right now. From, whether you have the grip, whether you have a dead ball or not. So I think like I feel like overall the sample size of what's going on, it's probably a little bit early or premature to start judging what's happening with the actual baseball. But hopefully, as weather warms up, people can find their grip. Because you look at last year when we implemented the rule of making sure that we're you know legislating sticky stuff. I think for the most part, the game was still under control. And so hopefully this is not some continued narrative that we're going to hear about moving forward. But I certainly can understand that there's been some frustration. And I know the Mets have been hit a lot, not just by the Cardinal pitchers, but by others. And, I can imagine there's some frustration in their dugout. But, you turned the page the night before, and it was a game where I think guys were controlling the strike zone pretty well. So, ultimately, I think there are going to be games like that. You hope nobody gets hurt, and hopefully we can move forward.
Yeah, no question. The Mets have been hit 18 times, the most in the majors. But as a starting staff, John, you guys are doing pretty well. A 3.45 earned run average, and you're without the services of Jack Flaherty. What's the update on him?
Well, fingers crossed we get him back here in the next month and a half or so. Clearly, when right, he's an ace. So, we'd love to have him back. I think it's always disappointing when you don't have somebody that you're expecting to contribute, but our fingers are crossed that he'll be someone that, as we get into the summer months, that he's contributing to our rotation.
And finally, Jordan Hicks having to leave the ballgame after getting hit on the wrist. Is he okay?
He is. Did have x-rays last night. Those were negative. I was told this morning he felt okay. So we'll just see how he responds over the next couple of days to determine if he will make that next start or not.
All right. John Mozeliak, the president of baseball operations for the St. Louis Cardinals. Thanks for being with us here today on High Heat. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a great day.